I'm a true believer. And I believe that the Netflix culture, as it is and was adamant and critical to achieving a lot of the goals we want to achieve, but also to attract people that thrive within that culture and want to literally do the best work of their lives, which maybe sounds a bit soft, but if you're somewhere where you are enabled to show up in your best version and you can do your best work, that's how a company grows. I think a culture is not a static thing. It should be dynamic. And with that, I mean, certain fundamentals remain the same, I think. For me, in the Netflix culture, thinking about excellence or having the freedom to do your best work with all responsibilities that come with that, by the way. It goes hand in hand. That you focus on people, not over process, that you give context and don't control. There's a lot of fundamentals that I think remain the same for me, that's over a decade at Netflix. However, culture evolves with the footprint of a company, the footprint of your business, with what happens in the rest of the world. So I think it's healthy, natural, which is happening from the original Netflix culture deck to the next memo, to the next iteration, to the one that's now on the website.
RJ, super excited to have you here. We just had a little bit of chat in this, very special place, probably for Amsterdam. Lots of trade was happening here. Interesting place. So interesting to discuss your absolutely fantastic journey with the several companies, but especially Netflix here in Amsterdam. Just to get things started, maybe would be fantastic to hear from you. So how did everything start for you with Netflix? We chatted about this quite a bit already, but those first years, you were probably one of the first employees here, actually outside of US for Netflix. How did you join Netflix? What was the story there?
It's very nice being here, by the way, Albert. Nice to talk. It's intriguing just walking to your office, your second office just now. It feels a bit similar. So my journey started indeed as the 11th person in our Amsterdam office, which was the first Netflix office outside the US, actually. And I came from iWorks, where we just sold the company to Warner Brothers, which was exciting. So I knew entertainment a bit, and I knew that world. And then Netflix just started. And from iWorks, we've done a deal with Netflix. So I knew of Netflix, of course, but it was not big yet outside the US. It was just getting started, if you will. And then they were setting up shop here, and through the grapevine, somebody said, "Hey, isn't it something that's interesting for you to talk to them?" And okay, it felt less logical than maybe the bigger other companies out there, but I was intrigued and excited, actually, even more when I started to talk to people and start to figure out the culture and what actually the plans were. And it felt a bit like a bet or a gamble, which maybe sounds strange from the point of view we're here now, but then it felt like, okay, this might be something very intriguing in the people and the culture and what we are potentially doing. So anyway, it started as one of the first people at Keizersgracht, something a bit of an entrepreneurial, exciting challenge. That's how it felt to me. Anyway, that's almost 11 years ago now.
Yeah, walk us through sort of like that journey. Sort of like you came to the office. There are 10 people sitting there. What was the vibe? What was the basically ambition, goals? What you were planning to do?
Yeah.
Did you ever actually feel like it could be as big as it is now at that point of time?
No, I didn't. In a minute think that way. Maybe two thoughts or two anecdotes. One was that I talked to some people, but it was a handful of people in the office. So there was two people I could actually talk to. And the interviews, of course, were all online because my team was all in the US. So I spoke to a couple of people online. And then after 3 or 4 talks, they asked me, hey, the recruiter called me from California, from Silicon Valley, from Los Gatos, where we were mostly headquartered. And are you willing to come to California to interview? And I was like, what? Flying to California for job interviews? This is something else. Anyway, so I recall and then entering into our campus in Los Gatos and seeing the big buildings and what a big company Netflix already was. I knew it from data, but seeing all the people, so that made an impression. Think, oh shit, this is something much bigger potentially than I thought. And back then, talking to various people, and as well as the hiring manager, my hiring manager, and she said, yeah, probably in a couple of years you can maybe hire somebody. That was how we were looking at the finance function, finance and tax. I both oversaw back then, by myself doing everything. And maybe you can hire somebody. So no, there was no perspective of opening offices around the globe, having a team in 10 countries, and the size it grew to. No, I felt good about it, and I saw we can build something, but not that to the extent that it is right now.
No, it's all the story is always fascinating when from a small office the company grows to something big and making a huge impact globally. But we're here today to talk about finance as well. Yeah. So this is the area, sort of the function that you led here in Europe and in other parts of the world as well for the Netflix. So tell me a little bit more, like how did the function evolve over the time? So you joined which department? How many departments were there in finance, and sort of how it started growing? What were the sort of like the growth progression of the finance function?
Okay. Maybe as a context setting at first, I left Netflix a couple of months ago, right? So I'm mainly talking from my personal point of view. I cannot represent Netflix as such, right? But of course, in those 10.5 years, being part of a lot of finance, strategic, and the growth debates as such. So the reason for starting to build out our non-US based finance teams, starting with myself and a colleague then in Brazil, was that the business was growing outside the US, right? From a predominant American, Canada, LATAM business to a global business. So the goal was to expand Netflix and the service across the globe. For me, back to your question, that meant when do we need what functions, what people, what business support, where, and why? So to your question, it depended on the maturity of a country or the business maturity or the business needs, external or internal, if you will, what we needed on the ground. So for example, when do you need a payroll team outside the US? What size of a company, size of offices do you need payroll? Can you centralize? Can you do work from the US, or do you need it in a country, or maybe, for example, from Amsterdam for EMEA? Similar for accounts payable, or for reporting, or for business development support, for revenue and partnership support. Similar for travel expense, similar for content accounting, big part of course, our Netflix financial puzzle, if you will. So for all these functions and more, the question was, when do we need to have it on the ground to support all the teams that are there? Or when is there maybe an external need, again, reporting or government things to have it organized? So basically by the year, when opening more offices to serve business, to have business in the country, we would figure out when that finance need was needed. So when do we need, for example, we opened new office in Singapore, which was our regional hub. What do we need? When do we need somebody there, a finance manager, to lead everything finance and tax in Singapore? So that's were the questions we try to answer all the time. Thinking whether I answered your question, by the year, we added people outside the US, part of the same finance team, albeit then in my team, to make sure we balance all the needs that we needed, time zone wise, cultural wise, and just external business wise or internal support needs.
Yeah. Maybe one follow-up. So when you joined your the first finance person outside of US, how big was the finance function overall at Netflix at that time?
Ooh, that's a hard question. It's a matter of definition as well, right? What do you call finance? And I'm saying this because, for example, um, payroll in some organizations sits in finance, and some organization HR. At Netflix, for example, payroll sits within finance. Uh, that's payroll payments, for example, which is a big part of many companies nowadays, but as well for Netflix, right, with scale. Payments was in finance back then. Later on, it moved to product. So, as an example, it's hard to define finance. Um, our org, which was back then, has shaped differently as well because some parts moved out and grew differently. Probably was, I would say, 80 people globally, maybe 85, with with a handful outside US, or actually one, which of course it multiplied over the years. But also some other parts of finance, like tax, was in the finance team, and that moved out separately to be outside of finance, but more still into the CFO, right? But a different part of finance. So it's a bit of a definition question.
Yeah. And today, in broader definition, what's the size?
If you look at the chief accounting officer org, that part of finance, that's I would say roughly 300 people, a bit more, 350. The CFO org, so everything under our CFO, our CFO in the US, Spencer, is it's thousands of people, but it entails a lot of functions. So it's hard to give an answer. Maybe that helps to shape.
Yeah, but that's magnet sort of like shows the magnitude. And my question is, so you were very instrumental in building the some of the European outside of Europe teams as well. So interesting topic to discuss. Obviously, there's a very unique culture that Netflix has. We can discuss this a little bit later. Yeah. But curious, like, what was your approach getting the first team members? What kind of people you were looking for? So tell me a little bit more about like who were your first solo hires?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for me, it was really about what's first of all, the need. And again, I will say business need a lot because I think I believe finance is an enabler, less than a hurdle, right? Finance should enable business. Finance should enable in whatever way, shape, or form to get to right strategic execution or to the right business goals. I would hire people that are very independent, that can serve a wide range of topics, because back then when the team was like a handful of people, so my first hires literally were not a specialist in one area, but could do a lot just because I was doing a lot. And we didn't have teams set up in all these functions yet because we didn't have somebody looking after a specific part of our finance org. So I would hire broad professionals, more generalists, exactly, that could step into whatever was needed, which evolved over the years pretty quickly. When the offices and our presence grew, I needed people very focused on certain things. So that evolved in a way, and these people and these roles evolved. But at first, it was people that could talk to all their stakeholders in an office, whether it's marketing or comms or the business development teams or whatever they needed. They could translate it into finance, so they could actually serve as a first point of contact, but also being able to translate that to the majority of our teams in the US, with 9 hours time difference, and being the first person on the ground for the local teams. You need people to understand. I think I need people to understand a wide range of topics and not just a specific area. If you fast forward 2-3 years, quickly it became more specialized roles, which we needed, because if you have maybe a couple of legal entities to look after, it's different than if that grows to dozens and dozens of legal entities and all the support they need. Similar as the amount of people in an office that need specific support. So yeah, at first focusing on people broad, generalist, but with a very strong self-motivating, self-driving, understanding what needs to be done mentality. So I would say pretty tenured people relative to the roles, that had experience and broad experience. It could just hit the ground running, because we were running to build the business.
What was the process of hiring at that time? How did you find these people? How did you test for some of these things that you just mentioned now?
I'm laughing because maybe now Netflix is a household name in a good way. I mean that, right? And a name that people know and hopefully like to work for, which is a good thing. But in some of the countries where we start to hire, it was a new brand, right? I recall well when we opened some of our job racks in APAC or a team in Singapore, and it was not a well-known brand yet, and it's harder to attract people. So that's why I was laughing at your question. It became easier when you became a well-known brand and name, which we of course were in California and US. But so we didn't have in our smaller offices, we didn't have any recruiting presence yet the first years. So we relied on our US recruiting teams, which went really well on all the appointments and scheduling and even searching. And I think what those teams did really well, they would look based on our asks. If I would have a certain role, I would say maybe look at these 5, 6, 7 companies that I think have a culture and have people that I think would fit our culture well, what we need. And we would do our own, or I would do it as well, but they would do searches, right? Just go through looking at people through LinkedIn. What can we find? And I would approach people. Do you want to talk? Are you open to have a conversation? So we will be active looking for people. And through my own network, but also people I know, we would be very active trying to approach people through our own network. So we have a good reference. I think that direct approach helped in the early years. And then vetting, a lot of talks, meaning that if people are open to talk, we would probably have between 6 and 8 or something, 30-minute interviews. So potential candidates would talk to a lot of people. So they can form their opinion. Do I like the culture? Do I like the people? Do I like what they're doing? And the other way around, we would shape our perspective as well. So a lot of different people that form their opinion, bring them back together, and not people all in the finance function, different roles and perspectives. And then you form, I think, a pretty solid opinion in general about potential hire.
How did you, I'm curious if you had a challenge in terms of, at that time, the company was very American. Most of the people were based in the US. And so I had somewhat similar experience at Uber when we were building office here in Amsterdam. Then at Plaid did the same. Basically, when you're setting up this interview panels, the lens people looking at is very sort of like American. And, it may not be the case for the finance people, but for engineers, it could be different, right? It's like engineer coming out of a US university is very different. Engineer coming out of best French university is just, I think, obviously in the US, there's a lot more emphasis to communication, to the soft skills, while sort of like in Europe, it could be a little bit different. Yeah, curious, like if you had that sort of mismatches where just like you have great people, but like if you look at them from sort of like US lenses, it's just you don't see them. Did you have anything like that?
Yeah, and it's interesting, your experience, it's similar, right? In a fast growth environment where you need to hire a lot of people that come from hundreds of different backgrounds and perspectives and cultures. I think that was definitely a learning experience for everybody involved, from the recruiters to people on the panels to myself, which I actually enjoyed in a way, meaning, and I'll answer your question, that if you would interview, and I'm generalizing, of course, people that have worked in America versus, I don't know, somewhere in maybe Singapore, India, or the Netherlands or UK, we all have our own way of presenting ourselves, right? Or we are used to doing things in a certain way. And I think that showed up in interviews clearly, how you start the interview by being either personal, or you start summarizing your resume, or you start saying the great things you've achieved, or you're more humble. There's different ways. People are different as well, right? But different ways that I think certain groups from a certain country are used to interviewing. So I think the journey that I liked, but that sometimes was complicated, was trying to have the panel being diverse enough to not only look for what they were used to. So not a panel with only people sitting in the Amsterdam office, or only in the from one of our California offices, or only from finance, or only from legal, random examples, because there is a certain, I don't know, prejudice or certain bias. But yeah, that definitely showed up in the beginning, but it was harder to form panels that were diverse enough because there was not many people. So answering your question, I think that was definitely a learning phase for the whole company to do it right and try not to, as we I think all could do, often unconscious, hire people that look like us or present themselves like us. Like if you're extrovert, general people tend to like other extroverts, which is not by definition the best team if you have a team of all extroverts, right? So anyway, I think that's a learning phase that was nice, but also, never ending, maybe.
Culture.
Yeah.
So very interesting topic, especially in the context of Netflix. Obviously, very distinct culture of the company. High performance of the teams are one of the main values, right, for the company. So I think a lot is written on this books, articles on the Netflix culture. I think what is interesting is, was it the same from day one when you joined here? And again, sort of maybe in the context of European smaller sort of like version of the Netflix, how did you, like, was it somewhat sort of like different here? How did you bring that sort of like US culture here? Overall curious, how was the overall culture evolving here in Amsterdam in the beginning of the Netflix outside of the US?
Cool. Maybe as a general comment first, I think culture and the way you want to work together and the way you feel you should show up as a company and as people, I think it's the secret sauce to getting results and getting to what you want to achieve, whatever it is. I mean, it's great to be very good at your specific trade when whether you're an engineer or you're in talent, in HR. But culture, I think, makes or breaks a company to that real success or not. So I'm a true believer, and I believe that the Netflix culture, as it is and was adamant and critical to achieving a lot of the goals we want to achieve, but also to attract people that thrive within that culture and want to literally do the best work of their lives, which maybe sounds a bit, I don't know, a bit soft, but if you're somewhere where you are enabled to show up in your best version and you can do your best work, that's how a company grows. To your question now, I think a culture is not a static thing. I think it should be dynamic, and with that I mean certain fundamentals remain the same. I think for me, in the Netflix culture, thinking about excellence or having the freedom to do your best work with all responsibilities that come with that, by the way, goes hand in hand. It should go hand in hand. That you focus on people, not over process, that you give context and don't control. There's a lot of fundamentals that I think remained the same for me, that's over a decade at Netflix. However, culture evolves with the footprint of a company, the footprint of your business, with what happens in the rest of the world. So I think it's healthy, natural, which is happening from the original Netflix culture deck to the next memo, to the next iteration, to the one that's now on the website. It evolves. And again, I think that's healthy because it should also reflect what you do and still do, and also a bit what you aspire, right? It should be a mix. Some things is what you want to be and you try to behave that way. Sometimes you're good at it, sometimes a bit less, but you still aspire to be that way. And some things reflect what you literally do day to day to day. Your second part about the culture in Amsterdam or in the European, later EMEA headquarters, as it's called. Don't like the name headquarters, but the EMEA hub with a lot of teams overseeing a lot of different countries. In a way, like culture around the globe, there again, these fundamentals are the same. How you want to work, the type of people you feel will thrive, how you give constant feedback, how you want people to be humble, how you want people to be curious. Some of these values, I think, are universal. So whether you are sitting in Silicon Valley or in LA or in Mexico or in Korea or in Amsterdam, I think some of these values will resonate and will be similar. Some of the nuances, however, can be different. Maybe an easy example, a nice one, like if you talk about feedback and you want people to be candid and direct and open, maybe Dutch directness looks a bit different. I'm generalizing here, of course, than directness in, say, India or Korea. I don't know. So I think those nuances are critical if you talk about culture, that you bear in mind that there's a different perspective within a term that we all know, like be candid. How does candor look like in a different country? So when scaling to more and more offices, I think we just spend a lot of time talking about culture, what it means for people and what we expect from people, how that shows up. But I think, and then I'll pause, I think the main thing with all these things is that you see people living the culture in action. So you need to see other people behaving in a certain way, aligned with the culture, and then you see what actually it means other than words on paper. You know what I mean?
Makes sense. Maybe a little bit spicy twist to this. So yeah, we know that sort of in US, the employer-employee relationship have like a certain sort of structure. It's more like a wheel.
Yeah.
But then here in Europe, there's just like over years been a lot more protections built for the employees. And it's stuff like when you bring the Netflix culture, especially like Keeper's Test, where basically the employment is, there's a contract in the beginning where it's like, all right, so these are our values. This is the performance that we would like to have. It's actually not working out. That's okay. This is not a big deal. It's just who we are.
Yeah.
But then is there a conflict with the sort of the way a lot of companies get used to, and just like people get used to employment here in Europe? Yeah. So curious like how that part actually landed on this side of the pond.
It's an interesting one, right? At first, I would say that all countries or regions have their own, whether it's labor laws or regulation, and things that as a company you just have to abide by, right? And that can be very different. In this labor example, US versus maybe some of the European countries, it's a different reality. But you can talk about other different realities in tax laws or in how you regulate certain things. So I think that's the nice thing about being a global company. There is just nuances that you as a company have to work with, right? In this specific case, and you're referring to the Keeper's Test, which is about making sure that you as a leader with your fairly new team here, or as a founder, I should say, a leader, or myself as a leader at Netflix, I should feel I want to fight for every single person on my team. With that I mean, if somebody knocks on your door, well, I didn't have a door, but if somebody comes to your desk in our space and says, I'm considering to leave because I really want to work at Stacks, I should feel shit. No, what can I do to keep you? What can I do? What happened? Is there, and preferably before that happens. So the Keeper Test is about fighting for somebody because you need to feel that you don't want to lose that person. Even though I would say to people, please talk to other companies, talk outside, be open. And if you hear stuff and you learn from other companies, bring it back and we can incorporate. So that's the Keeper's Test, right? You want to keep people. It's a positive iteration, and you should talk with people about what they want and need actually to want to stay. Your question about the labor law is more if it doesn't work out, if you feel you need to part ways, how do you do that, right? And there's a legal element to it. Again, laws you need to abide by, but the personal element with somebody probably is always the most impactful. Somebody leaving a team, whether they want to leave or don't want to leave, is very impactful, I think. So doing that in a very careful, respectful way is most important for that person, for a leader doing it, but also for the rest of the team. And I think that's where the emphasis would lie on. So we would always say, if it doesn't work out, we'll respectfully thank you for the years and things you've done and you've achieved, no doubt, great things. And then we'll part in a respectful, good way for both sides, taking into account the legal limitations.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
In terms of the finance function, so you mentioned that finance function is an enabler. In the context of the Netflix, where do you think the biggest value finance function sort of or bringing to the business, apart from basically all the standard things that you need to do, right?
Yeah.
Just like follow what was the value add of the functions? How did you work closely with different product lines as well? Just curious, sort of like the way the function was adding value to the business.
I think there's two lines. I think one is the one you refer to as more the operational side of finance, right? Meaning keeping the lights on, doing the things that need to be done within all the finance functions to keep everything running, preferably very smoothly, right? So people in other functions have what they need to execute, to do their roles, or to get paid. Vendors, everything that needs to be done for the business to run. I think that's the operational side, which sometimes can be cannot be seen in its value, because if that goes well, nobody is interrupted, right? So it's an operational piece that you should hopefully standardize, make very efficient, with great people that know what they're doing, and it shouldn't be a burden. That's the operational side. I think on the strategic side of finance, I hope finance is more that strategic enabler to provide perspectives or insights or a voice or data, or is a partner in debates for that team to make the right decisions. There's different sides to that, right? Whether it's about being clear on certain boundaries. There might be red flags on certain pieces of business for whatever reason, because if you go into a certain country, it will trigger this, this, and this. So there might be strategic limitations that you might want to flag. There might be financial repercussions of certain actions that might be fine, right? Because the upside of doing something strategic is more important. But I think you need to be proactive in saying this is a potential impact, financial impact, and then it's just hopefully with insights and data and perspectives help to make a better business decision. And that should be, and it could be across all parts of the business, right? Whether you're talking pricing models, or whether you're talking how certain countries are evolving, or certain steps you want to take or need to take in a country to make it even more successful. A wide area of things, I would say.
Basically, a lot of teams, they're talking about finance becoming more strategic over the time. But then the change is happening not necessarily equally fast in every company, in every team. For your team, how did you encourage your team to be more strategic? Like, what were like maybe like tactical things that you used with your team to sort of bring the team a little bit to that future?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when a team grows and a company grows, people get into more specialist roles and have a focus on a specific thing as part of a bigger thing, but it gets more niche in a way. And I think a risk of that is that people feel less connected to what you're actually doing as a company. When you're smaller, it's logical, you know all your products, you know what you're doing, you know what you're building, you know your strategy. If the team gets bigger, you're focusing on something smaller as a part of something bigger. And I think I need to continually emphasize what it is we're doing as a company or as a team, and how you, in your specific role, how she or he is contributing to that. So I think that's one element to seeing your value in your specific role. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that and not to talk about, and not to see the bigger picture, if you will.
This is excellent. I think point that you mentioned, just like explaining why they're doing, like where we're moving as a team and as a company. Yeah. So anything else that been helpful for you?
I think especially for leaders in a team, and when you get bigger, back to my earlier point, you get bit more layers and more leaders. I think leaders should feel comfortable. Well, first learning to lead. It's hard. I don't think lead is a. I think leading is a skill that's often underestimated, and you learn at a certain business area or a certain trade in finance. But then you have to learn how to lead. I think spending time on what that actually means, what it means to lead in a company, in this case, a company like Netflix, I think is also something that we did spend a lot of time on, and we had to spend a lot of time on, other than talking about what the culture looks like in practice. But then what does leading look like of a team? So we would use often like Harvard Business Review articles or maybe extracts from books. So certain elements that you could talk about, could read, and could distill certain elements from, other than saying you have to do this or you have to do that, but distilling certain learnings from others. Again, there's a lot of great books or articles out there. Was a way of, I think, helping leaders and people on the team to have a broader perspective and a broader horizon, if you will, and how they lead. I think that has helped. And I think in general, people, at least I liked it, but I think to learn from others, we've done that quite a bit.
In terms of the tooling for your team, finance is known for a lot of manual workflows, and sometimes this time sink not allowing the teams to be strategic as well, because basically it's just moving around lots of spreadsheets and hard deadlines to get certain things done. Curious what was the approach at Netflix? What is approach at Netflix? Did you have an internal technology team helping you? How did you approach to automating some of the processing there?
There are a couple of things. First, maybe in general, I think the mindset in a team, in a finance team, which is maybe more easy in an entertainment company based on tech, right? So it should be, how can we improve the status quo? How can we improve the way we do work? And is a way of tooling, or let me call it automation, and whether historically it would be smarter in Excel, or it would be machine learning, or it would be algorithmic solutions, or now AI. There's always been ways to improve a process. So I think the mindset in a team should always be, how can we make what we do today smarter or better? And sometimes there is people solutions, right? But often there's tooling solutions. So I think we tried at least to have that mentality, to not accept the status quo, but to think about ways to do it smarter, which in the end benefits the team, because it means that you can spend your time on hopefully things that you like to do better. So it means talking about it. And if there are solutions that teams are considering, making sure all other either leaders or teams see and hear about it, because it might work for them as well. So I think it should be a discussion topic, full stop, in meetings. What we did started 8-9 years ago. We had, of course, a lot of engineers and a big teams in California, mainly in Los Gatos. We started to have, which we called finance technology and people technology team members in our finance teams, at least in the one in Singapore and in Brazil and Amsterdam. That meant that these very smart, I must say, people, they understood what finance and tax is, but they were able as engineers to translate that into improvements to either our ERP system, like so Workday. Can we do things differently or better? They could actually help. If we would have to make adaptations or work with data, or needed certain dashboarding, or we needed to build a solution, or maybe go external to buy something, they could facilitate. So they were, if you will, embedded in our teams and in our team meetings and everything we did, right? And with that, we had closer, if you will, tech access and a different lens, actually, that it's hard to have if you don't have the background. I think that helped a lot in creating that mentality that there is a lot of solutions and tooling available. And if there was, for example, external questions or needs for certain, data dumps or certain analytical stuff, they could help quickly build that in existing systems. or find an easy way to do it. So it was embedded in our teams. And I think that helped in our way of having tooling or automation or whatever solution we would call right now, and be at the forefront of thinking.
Yeah. Would you do anything differently on sort of like technology side of the thing, based sort of like on your experience and learnings?
I mean, there's a couple of things that I would be very proud of that we did in the early years, like a decade ago, that I thought, oh, if we scale, let's not build something just for country A, and not just for A and B, but well, if this goes off, and this is what's happening in different countries, let's make something that we can easily add other countries to later on. So this is not answering your question, but I'll get to it. My point being, some things where with foresight, you do something that's very scalable, and that you don't build. And we tried not to build things for one specific ask or one specific country, but something that we then can quickly scale if country A, B, C, D, E comes into play. That's the good approach. Have we always done that? So now to your question, where I regret, I think in some instances, I would have liked to be a bit more rigid on that. Meaning even better thinking ahead. If this works well in this part of the world, let's make sure we do it exactly the same in this part of the world, because then we have a single approach, maybe a single source of information or truth. As we've always benefited from one ERP system, which is a great thing not to have legacy, but being even more mindful of not creating or getting into legacy systems or legacy ways of working. So I think in the next adventure role, I would be even more mindful, although I felt we were doing it pretty okay, but it can be better.
In the world of AI, pretty much, every role is evolving very fast. What's your thinking how the finance function will change, and if you are finance leader, or if you are just part of the finance team, not in the leadership roles, what should people be prepared for? Like, what are the key things, skills everyone needs to invest to stay like relevant?
It's a $1 billion question, right? So at first, I think AI, and before all the smaller pieces of evolution in tech, let's call it that way, have always been enablers to be quicker, smarter, more efficient, or be able to focus more on the nice parts of your job. So for me, AI, which is it's a bigger evolution as such, but I think it will help many roles to be just to be better and quicker. I know this is a general statement, but that's how I look at it. And I feel that it's not a threat to any people, teams, or role. It will just make roles more exciting, because you can focus on the stuff where you have the direct added value, and AI in whatever way, shape, or form will help you to do that in a good way. More depth, more breadth, more better, quicker. So I see it as a good thing for teams. There's a lot of used cases right now where I think you already see this happening. And often this is in parts of finance. We talked about operational and strategic. I think it will play a role in both. But I think if you look at the operational side, maybe that's an easier add-on, because there's a lot of processes and a lot of repetitiveness and a lot of flows of process where you can tap in and can prevent error and make it more quick. So I would say, I think all teams need to first be aware what's out there. Well, to the extent you can keep up the pace of the evolution going on, but it's because it's so quick. So teams need to be aware. I think teams need to try and work with pieces of their finance team or their finance processes to see how it actually works. You need to start working with it. Otherwise, you never figure out what it is. And I think it should be a strategic topic in every finance leadership team. What does it mean for now? Then in 2-3 years, in 5+ years? Because otherwise, I think you're easy caught off guard, either by legacy in your team, or by people in your team saying, I expect us to work on this. So I think that's my general feeling. How you organize yourself, meaning if everybody in the finance team of 100 people starts running and do stuff with AI, probably not the best thing, right? So you have to think about how you organize yourselves in a way. Is there a smaller part of your team that will start building a roadmap? Or is there a subset of your team that's excited about this that will start doing not a test as such, but incorporate in the existing processes, or having a separate process doing it with AI, one without? Whatever you do, but I think you should start working with it before, again, you're caught off guard.
If you had 10 brilliant engineers, best AI engineers, or some infinite resources as well, which part of the finance would you automate? Where would you build?
I think there's a lot of data, external data. I know there's solutions for that in the marketplace, but there's a lot of analytical work we do, or companies have consultants do, or which is like foundational analytics of what's happening out there. So analyzing other companies, analyzing flows of data you have. I would say everything related to your strategic goals as a company that you have right now or have for the coming years, and have an AI and these brilliant engineers help analyze all scenarios, help analyze external data from other companies. What have they done wrong or what have they done well? So I would use as a lot of foundational work that then can be brought to a table where you can make a decision based on that. Other than the operational side, I think operationalizing a lot, I think is the operational side of finance and making flows easier, I think is a bit of a no-brainer in a way. But the other piece I think is more intriguing. So again, helping strategize based on external information out there, and in modeling or scenario planning, helping to gain insights that will make you a better decision maker.
That's definitely a very sort of like interesting area. Interesting to see how sort of like all these use cases will evolve over the time. Maybe a little bit shifting the gears. You and I, we chatted a number of times about overall ecosystem in the Netherlands, in Europe, broadly. You've been part of building one of the greatest tech company of our time, Netflix. What do you think we should do to build more companies like that out of Europe? What's the secret of companies like Netflix, where we should invest more and pay more attention? How we can get more companies like that coming out of maybe Amsterdam, maybe Europe broadly?
Well, first of all, I think I was privileged to, as we talked about, start at the time Netflix was small, and privileged to be part of that journey, right? So together with many other people, we've tried a lot of things, and we made a lot of mistakes, things that didn't go well. And luckily, a lot of things did go well, right? Looking at the last decade at Netflix. So I'm just a very small piece of a very big puzzle, and a lot of things we've tried and done, just as a starter. I think back to the Amsterdam, let's call it the Netherlands, Amsterdam, Netherlands, European. What ecosystem are we talking about, right? I think that's the debate right now, looking at our geopolitical landscape. What do we, and are we European citizens? If you look at all the cultures that are working here in Amsterdam, it's far more than European, but still, I think it's a fundamental question for Europe. And with that also for the Netherlands as a relatively small country, but within a potentially big ecosystem. What do we need? What do companies need? What do you need as a founder? What do new scale-ups and startups need for their success? And there's a lot, right? There is, whether it's certain laws and regulations that help create a company or create people that are working there and can benefit in the longer term. There's an ecosystem in a city where can you attract talent? Can you have people come here and work for these new great companies? Is there enough funding? Is there enough potentially future independent data centers I mean, is there ability to actually build your company to a certain scale? Is there enough capital, whatever round you're in, whether it's seed or VC? Is there enough? I mean, that all creates, I think, a thriving ecosystem, which I don't have answers to, other than thoughts about. This all should work well together to create something. And I think a lot of great things have been done. If you look at how certain ecosystems grew, but I think looking at what's happening in the world right now, there should be a lot of emphasis on this and energy, and that's a lot of different stakeholders that need to want this to happen. I know it's a wide answer, but I think we can all play our small roles with introducing people or being part of that ecosystem, trying to help smaller, bigger companies and be part of that. But there's also a role. We all have a role, but also a role for I think, for a government, and a role for the EU, right, European Commission, to make sure that we try to stay ahead as a region, as a country, which is not easy.
Yeah, RJ, to maybe wrap things up, few sort of quick questions.
Yeah.
What's the one book you would recommend for any finance leader? It could be non-finance book, but something that maybe made a huge impact on you as a leader as well.
I will name two, although you only ask one. Very different. A book that I think for a leader, not per se in finance, is a very valuable book to read is The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. He talks about what's needed to create a strong leadership team and what elements you need. It's also about culture, by the way. What you need to thrive as a team, to truly thrive as a team. We've used that book a lot. I think so. Patrick Lencioni, The Advantage, is a really strong management book that I really like. I've read quite a bit. Another one that I liked and I even distributed to some of our team members is the book by Dan McCrum called Money Man, which is basically a story from the German Wirecard scandal that happened. And why do I find this book intriguing? Is because everybody involved in this crazy big scandal that happened in Germany with Wirecard, all stakeholders, from potentially auditors to the regulators to everybody involved, want to believe in this next shiny thing and wanted it to be successful. And nobody asked questions anymore what was happening. And it, of course, went completely south. And the example there is that in every decision you make in a company, and translating to a smaller scale, if you are in a team, people need to always question in a respectful way, debate what you're doing, and not follow others that are very excited. I think that's a threat for every company. So those two books for me, I think have a really valuable lesson, and I like them.
What's the biggest bet that you made in your career?
I mean, I studied tax law, realizing after a couple of years that I liked more finance, more strategy. So I tried to shift, which worked out, but it felt like a big bet away from your education, university, and what I'd worked in, to something else. It felt like a bet, but I knew that that's what I wanted. And in a way, as we talked about when I interviewed at Netflix, that small company in Amsterdam, compared to other bigger companies that I was also talking to, it felt like a bit of a bet. It might sound awkward. People would say, yeah, I mean, this is new. Does it work? Do you think really? Anyway, for me, that felt like a bit of a bet. But I was very eager to try. So those two things come to mind.
What's the biggest myth about the finance and just like leadership in finance?
Yeah, that's a nice one. I think in many of the gatherings or finance groups I'm in, finance can still be seen, I think, from people in the business, in commerce, going outside as a bit of an evil, something you need to keep things running. And I think the myth, that slowly that's changing, but I think finance is really a business partner, is sitting next to you, with you, to get to success. I think this is happening. So I think the myth is that it's like maybe something you need to you need because you need to, but I think it should be something you see as an added value to getting to your business results. At least that's how I see it, and I hope others as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, RJ, for spending time joining us today. It was incredibly insightful conversation. All of these stories about small office and then growing something big is very inspirational, and I think helps me, others, just feel like you can build something big if you're determined, if you have some of the things that we discussed, and then the conversation of the culture is obviously very, very interesting with a lot of insights. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.